Welcome, class, to the Garage Studio. I'm Mr. Clark, and let's talk about the Warren Court. In the 1960s, a new Chief Justice would reign supreme. Chosen by Dwight Eisenhower in the 1950s, California Governor Earl Warren took the position and became a regret that Eisenhower lived with until his dying day. At one point, Eisenhower called Warren that son of a bitch, Warren. Sounds friendly. The Warren Court decided on three key issues that expanded rights for all Americans: voting rights, due process, and prayer and privacy. Let's kick things off with voting rights. Yahoo! Voting rights cases in the 1960s, Baker versus Carr and Reynolds versus Sims, which helped set a precedent for the principle of one person, one vote. Previously to these Supreme Court cases, many states failed to redraw their district lines after their most recent census. In the first case of Baker versus Carr in Tennessee, the last time Tennessee had redrawn their district lines was 1900, and the year was 1960. There's been a few censuses since then. In the ruling of the case, the Supreme Court decided that the federal government could step in and make decisions on political districts. Reynolds versus Sims took that one step further and forced Alabama to redraw their district lines to make sure that each district had equal population. There were many discrepancies within the Alabama state lines. As you can see here, some districts had lots of people with one representative. Other districts had very few people with one representative. Not so fair, because guess who lived in those larger districts? African Americans. Way to be racist, Alabama. As we move on from voting rights, we go into the due process section of the cases. The first one, Mapp versus Ohio, was an interesting case. Dolly Mapp was accused of hiding a suspected bomber at her house, and once the police arrived, she said, "I don't think you're coming in because I don't see no warrant and you can't just come into my house." So the police left, and they consulted with this fella right here. Looks like a real scumbag. And they came back with a piece of paper that they flashed in her face, barged into the door, and tried to find the bombing suspect. They did not find the bombing suspect, but they did find a giant box of porn, which is actually illegal in this time. So they took Dolly to the jail. In the Supreme Court case, they decided that, oh, guess what? That piece of paper that was flashed was nothing. So there was no legitimate search warrant presented in front of her, meaning that all the evidence collected in the investigation was inadmissible, meaning you can't use it in a court. She goes free, and the Supreme Court decision states that you must present a warrant to search someone's house. And if you don't, anything you find ain't going into evidence. The next case, Gideon versus Wainwright. Gideon's Trumpet was a 1980s movie that I saw when I was in 9th grade. A little bit slow on the plot because it involved an 80-year-old man, but the lessons learned were great. So basically what happened was Clarence Earl Gideon was accused of robbing a pool hall. He liked quarters, and he said he didn't do it. Goes to court, defends himself. And it's really hard to be your own lawyer if you don't know how to practice law.
You know positively that I was carrying a pint of wine?
Yes, sir, I know you was.
How do you know?
Because I seen it in your hand.
Do you have any more questions of the witness, Mr. Gideon?
I guess not.
Witness may step down.
So what happened? He blows his defense, and they find him guilty of quarter theft and sentence him to prison. He goes to prison, does some research, reads a book, finds out that you can apply to have your case heard by the Supreme Court, writes a letter, gets the Supreme Court to hear his case, and because of his efforts, He is the reason why everybody has the right to an attorney, even if you have one pair of clothes. The next case, Escobedo versus Illinois. Danny Escobedo definitely murdered a guy, and it was because he was kind of a jerk to his sister. That's what a good brother does, I guess. Maybe just don't kill people. That's a good lesson. So Escobedo goes into the interrogation room, where they interrogate him for hours, but forget to tell him one little detail, that, hey, you know, you can talk to a lawyer, fella, and you don't have to say anything. So he sits there, and he sits, and he sits, and he waits, and he confesses to the crime. Yeah. However, maybe due to his court-appointed lawyer, they find out that he was not given the ability to see a lawyer, which means the case is thrown out, and he gets out of jail. Last case, Miranda versus Arizona in the due process section. This one's a bit dark. Miranda definitely kidnapped and raped a woman, and they interrogated him for hours on end, where he finally confessed to the crime in writing. He was also not made aware of his ability to remain silent and also to see his counsel. So due to the lack of procedure, the criminal, Miranda, is not set free, but he is granted a retrial. Due to the words of other witnesses, he is convicted yet again and thrown in jail for 20 to 30 years. But because of the Miranda versus Arizona case, every time you see a cop show or get arrested yourself, you will hear the words, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Blah, 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 blah. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. And that's all I remember. Yep.
The right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights as they have been read to you?
Lastly, in the area of prayer in school, the Supreme Court decides that, hey, guess what? In a public school, you cannot force your children to pray, and you cannot force them to read Bibles in class. In the final case of Griswold versus Connecticut, it was ruled that married women could, in fact, legally buy birth control. This is the start of the modern feminist movement. However, the right to buy birth control was not expanded to single women for a few more years. But this Warren Court was responsible for the expansion of basic rights to every single American. You know what? I'm going to take the time. Thanks, Earl. You're a real cool guy.